It was a dark, moonless night in the small Serbian town of Zvezdara. My coworker Anna and I were walking home after a long day and decided to take the shortcut through the alleyway of the cathedral. We hummed a tune to pass the time. The only sound accompanying us was the soft shuffling of leaves under our feet. The streets were empty, except for a few stray cats darting around in the shadows. I bent down and fed them half my sandwich from lunch. As we neared the end of the street, a chill ran down my spine. The cats started hissing and yowling in terror, then ran past us. It was then that we saw her, a woman dancing straight ahead. She was standing on the other side of the street, illuminated only by the flickering light of a nearby street lamp. At first, I thought she was a street performer, dressed in traditional Serbian clothing with a long flowing skirt that swayed with her every movement. But as we got closer, I noticed that something was off. Her movements were unnatural, jerky, and exaggerated. Her face was expressionless, her eyes vacant. We turned around and quickened our pace, wanting to put some distance between us. But the dancing lady followed, her movements becoming more frenzied. So we ran. We tried to lose her, but she was right behind us. And Anna tripped and fell. I couldn't stop running. I looked back. Her long fingers reached out and grabbed Anna by the shoulder, her nails digging into her flesh. She struggled to break free, but the dancing woman was too strong. I screamed in anger, cursing the stranger, and ran over to free Anna. The strange woman smiled from ear to ear and released her. She immediately grabbed me. Her grip tightened, and I could feel her hot breath on the back of my neck. She whispered something in a language I didn't understand. But even if I had, I don't think I would have been able to comprehend the madness in her voice. She pushed me to the ground. As she danced around me, I felt a sense of overwhelming dread. I sat there frozen in terror. The woman continued to dance, moving with a grace and fluidity that seemed supernatural. Her movements were wild, and her face was contorted into a grotesque grin. I tried not to fixate on her and looked around for an escape. Then she pulled out a knife, and I knew that I was in the presence of something evil, something beyond my comprehension. The dancing lady seemed to be in a trance, lost in a world of her own. But she wasn't alone. Suddenly, I heard a scream coming from behind me. I turned to see Anna being dragged away by two figures dressed in black. They were faceless, featureless shadows, their movements silent and swift. I tried to run after them, but the dancing lady held me back with a strength that defied her small figure. Anna's screams echoed through the empty streets, growing fainter and fainter until they faded away completely. I was left alone with the dancing lady, her movements growing more frenzied by the second. I knew that if I didn't get away soon, I would suffer the same fate as my friend. With a burst of adrenaline, I managed to break free and run as fast as I could in the opposite direction. I didn't look back until I had reached the safety of my own apartment building. And when I did, I could have sworn I saw the woman floating in the air in the distance. As I fumbled with my keys, I could feel the dancing lady's eyes boring into the back of my head. But when I took one last look as I closed the door, she was gone. I bolted it shut and ran inside, and panicked as I called Anna's cell phone. There was no response. I called a few more times and each call went straight to voicemail. 1,000 thoughts were running through my head. Maybe she was able to fight them off and run away, but dropped her phone in the process. Perhaps she was already safe at home and passed out in exhaustion. Or maybe she isn't picking up because she can't. Then Anna finally called me back, and I sighed in relief. But when I answered the phone, "Hello, Anna?" All I heard was the sound of heavy breathing and then the foreign language. I felt dread in the pit of my stomach. so I hung up on whoever that was and immediately called the police. They told me they'd be at my place in 5 minutes. I sat on my couch, shaking and counting down the seconds until I would be protected. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I looked over at my balcony door, and there she was, the dancing lady, holding Anna's head in one hand and her bloody knife with the other. I nearly fainted. She just kept dancing, while scratching the glass door with her knife. Her moves were more erratic. As I watched her move from side to side, I was hypnotized. Despite my fear, I couldn't look away. It was as if I was under her spell, entranced by her dance. I slowly got up, walked over, slid the door open, and let her in, and had lost control of my body. We started dancing together. Our eyes were locked on one another. The dancing lady was unlike anything I had ever encountered before. Her movements were eerie and unsettling, and her eyes seemed to pierce through my very soul. And she pulled up her knife to the side of my neck and whispered in her language again. I wanted to scream and punch her, but I couldn't. Then we heard the police sirens, my saving grace, as they ran up the stairs and started banging on my door. The dancing lady kissed me farewell on the cheek, then jumped out the balcony into the night. I stared into the darkness. The only sound was the pounding of my heart. And then I fainted. The next morning, I woke up in the hospital. I sat up in bed, sweating and shaking. I sat there, lost in my thoughts as the doctor took a few tests and discharged me. I asked about Anna and the dancing lady, and they looked at me confused and checked my head once more. As I left, I called Anna's family. I didn't know how to explain what had happened to their daughter. But as we talked, I realized something strange. Anna's family didn't seem to remember who she was. It was as if she had never existed. I tried to brush it off as a bizarre coincidence, but the more I thought about it, the more it troubled me. And then I remembered the strange language the dancing lady had spoken to me. So I scoured the internet and spoke to locals for any clues that could shed light on the mysterious woman. It turned out that the dancing lady was a demon, a powerful entity capable of possessing those it encountered, forcing them to dance until they died of exhaustion or were consumed by madness. The faceless shadows that took Anna were her minions. I knew I had to do something, so I started to learn everything I could about her weaknesses. I prepared myself for the inevitable showdown. I went to the cathedral where I first encountered the dancing lady and waited. It was a dark, moonless night, much like the one when I first encountered her. But this time I was armed with my knowledge. She appeared out of thin air. I stood my ground and faced the demon head-on. The battle was fierce, and at times it seemed as though the dancing lady had the upper hand. But I refused to give in, drawing on all my strength. And then, in a final burst of energy, I struck her with a powerful blow, sending her reeling backward. For a moment, there was silence, and I thought that I had won. But then, with a roar, she lunged forward, her body twisting and contorting in an unnatural dance. I braced myself for the worst, ready to face whatever the demon had in store, and remember that demons could be weakened with the power of faith. And so I began to recite the prayers my grandmother had taught me as a child. As I prayed, her movements became more sluggish. And then, in a blinding flash of light, she was gone, leaving me standing alone in the darkness. The memory of that night still haunts me to this day. I don't know what the dancing lady wanted from me. I learned that there are things in this world that defy explanation, forcing us to confront the limits of our own sanity. In the end, there was no escaping the Serbian dancing lady. She had claimed me as her own, and I was doomed to be her eternal dance partner.